The drop site massacre was one of the earliest and most violent battles to occur during the Horus Heresy, taking place upon the world of Istvan V. Following the revelation that informed him of Horus Lupercal, the War Master of the Imperium, turning traitor and rebelling against the Emperor, Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terror, would effectively instate Rogul Dawn of the Imperial Fists Legion as the new War Master in all but name. Dawn, in response to his brother's betrayal, would dispatch a total of 7 Space Marine legions in order to crush Horus's uprising before it could gain traction. These legions dispatched by Dawn would include the Iron Hands, Raven Guard, Salamanders, Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, Night Lords, and the Alpha Legion. Prior to word of this rebellion reaching Terra, Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's Children and one of Horus's co-conspirators, would attempt to sway Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands Legion to their cause. Fulgrim genuinely believed that Ferrus would ally himself with the traitor Legion forces due to the close bond that he and the Iron Hands Primarch shared, even to the point of Horus factoring the Iron Hands Legion as being a part of his army for this rebellion. Despite this, Ferrus Manus would remain staunchly loyal to the Emperor, and refuse to become a turncoat like his brother. A brief but violent skirmish would then ensue between the Iron Hands and Emperor's Children fleets, before the traitors would manage to flee, but not before inflicting significant damage upon several Iron Hand ships. Due to this, when Ferrus Manus received his orders from Rogul Dawn to make for Istvan, Ferrus would become fueled by the anger caused by his close friend's betrayal and a desire for revenge. Ferrus would take the fastest, still fully functioning ships of his fleet, along with his most elite veteran warriors, rushing blindly ahead of the other Loyalist forces. When the Loyalists launched their assault against the traitors, they would suffer devastating losses. It would be revealed that the Alpha Legion, Word Bearers, Night Lords, and Iron Warriors legions had all declared themselves for Horus, and would inflict heavy casualties on the still loyal Raven Guard, Salamanders, and Iron Hands legions, catching them in a deadly crossfire. But one of the most heinous blows that the traitor legions were able to deliver would without a doubt be the death of Ferrus Manus. Fulgrim and Ferrus, once closest of friends and dearest of brothers, now bitter enemies, would engage in a savage duel during the course of the battle. Fulgrim would eventually triumph over his brother and beheaded the Iron Hands Primarch with but a single swipe of his blade. The lifeless body of Ferrus Manus would be torn apart for trophies, and his skull would be delivered to Horus as a trophy of war. The 3 Loyalist legions upon Istvan were decimated and shattered, and Horus would claim the first of many victories during the course of the heresy. But what if Fulgrim had been successful in his attempts to sway Ferrus Manus into joining him in rebelling against the Emperor? What could potentially have happened as a result of such an action? One of the most obvious differences would be that Ferrus Manus himself would not have died at the hands of Fulgrim during the drop site massacre, as Fulgrim and Ferrus, who would be fighting on the same side during the battle, would have no reason to come to blows at this specific point in time. This in turn would also mean that Fulgrim would not have surrendered himself to the entity bound within the Leia Blade, a demonic sword that Fulgrim had taken as a trophy from a temple dedicated to the Chaos god Slaanesh following his legion's cleansing of the world of Laren. Fulgrim would allow the demon within the Leia Blade to take possession of his body, due to the Primarch becoming overcome with grief and sorrow caused by the act of murdering his closest and dearest friend. But if Fulgrim never slew Ferrus Manus, due to Ferrus battling alongside him, then the Emperor's Children Primarch would not have fallen completely under the Blade's influence, or at the very least, not until a later point in time. This in turn would also mean that Fulgrim would not have been made aware of the possibilities of obtaining almost unlimited power by ascending to demonhood, or again, at the very least, not yet. As such, it would also be reasonable to assume that Fulgrim would not have travelled into the warp space rift known as the Eye of Terror alongside Perturabo of the Iron Warriors in order to seek out the artifact known as the Angel Exterminatus. This would also mean that Fulgrim would not have attempted to sacrifice Perturabo in order to obtain immortality as a demon prince of Slaanesh. Admittedly, it is still possible that Fulgrim could have ascended to demonhood at some undetermined point during or perhaps even after the events of the Horus Heresy. A consequence of this alteration of the timeline would be that since Fulgrim had not become a demon prince, at least not at this point in time, then the Emperor's Children Legion would still retain a semblance of order and stability within their ranks, despite the Legion's downward spiral towards the worship of Slaanesh. Fulgrim's Legion would begin to fracture into separate warbands following the Primarch's ascension to demonhood, due to Fulgrim effectively no longer caring about the outcome of the war, instead becoming preoccupied with events unfolding upon his newly gifted Pleasure Planet. If Fulgrim did not become a demon prince, then it's likely that he would still have been able to exert and retain more control over his legion. However, a few warbands would most likely and inevitably break away to pursue their own agendas. Another significant action that would not take place, should Ferrus Manus and his legion join Horus's cause, is that the captain of the Iron Hand's 10th Company, Shadrach Medusan, would not have orchestrated an assassination attempt upon the War Master. Following the Battle of Dwell, when Horus met with his fellow conspirators Fulgrim and Mortarion, Shadrach Medusan would coordinate a surprise attack upon the traitor Primarchs, using a trio of Fire Raptor gunships that severely injured the War Master, though ultimately failed to kill him. It was because of this attempt on his life that Horus was able to access previously repressed memories regarding a Chaos Gate upon the world of Molech, and upon entering the gate, the War Master would perform various labours to gain the favours of the Chaos Gods. When he emerged from the realm of Chaos, Horus had not only visibly aged, but had obtained near godly levels of power. But if Medusan never launched this attack that almost claimed Horus's life, then the Primarch's memories of Molech would most likely have remained locked away deep in some hidden recess of his mind. If Horus never reacquired these lost memories, then not only would he still remain ignorant about the Chaos Gate upon Molech, but in turn, this means that he would not have had the opportunity to have the ruinous powers augment his abilities with their unholy blessings. Because the War Master had never obtained an increase in power, then if Horus were still to battle against Sanguinius of the Blood Angels or Leman Russ of the Space Wolves in a one-on-one duel, then the chances that one of these loyalist brothers defeating or slaying the War Master in combat increases exponentially. This is especially noteworthy as Leman Russ would inflict a severe wound upon Horus during the Battle of Trisolian, and Sanguinius was rumoured to have inflicted the damage to Horus's armour necessary that allowed the Emperor to slay his traitorous son. In addition, this would also mean that, should Horus meet the Emperor in battle, then Horus would be the underdog in such a fight, as the Emperor's own godlike power would have vastly eclipsed Horus in terms of sheer psychic potency. The short story, The Last Council, shows that Horus had little defense against so potent a Psyker, as Malcador the Sigillite would use his psychokinetic powers to almost choke the very life from the Primarch, due to Horus attempting to utter the name of one of the lost Primarchs. Since the Emperor was a Psyker whose power eclipsed even that of Malcador, then this would mean that the only chance Horus would have in besting the Master of Mankind in battle would be due to the Emperor's own hesitation. But ultimately, such eventualities may not have even occurred. If the Iron Hands turned traitor, then not only would Horus have yet another Space Marine Legion with which to swell his ranks, but the events of the Istvan V drop site massacre could have potentially succeeded in all but utterly destroying the two remaining Loyalist legions of that battle, the Raven Guard and Salamanders. During the course of the massacre, the Loyalist legions would suffer devastating losses. The Raven Guard, for example, would lose over 93% of the legion's warriors, with their Primarch Corvus Corax barely managing to escape the carnage, thanks to the timely arrival of the Raven Guard reserve fleet led by Captain Bran Nev. If Ferrus Manus and his legion turned traitor, then there is also the very real possibility that not only would all but the reserve forces of the Raven Guard and Salamander's legions be utterly annihilated, but the Primarchs of Corvus Corax and Vulcan could also have been slain upon the battlefield, or at the very least, taken prisoner and tortured by their treacherous kin. If the latter occurred, then the events regarding Vulcan's torture at the hands of Conrad Kurz of the Night Lords could lead towards a series of events unfolding similar to those that took place within Rabute Guilliman's Imperium Secundus. But if this were the case, then this would also mean that the Raven Guard's secret Raptor project would never have been undertaken, nor would the Alpha Legion have sabotaged such a project or steal the research and genetic samples involved for their own nefarious purposes. Overall, this would leave Horus in command of 10 traitor legions, compared to the Emperor's paltry 6. Such a vast difference in military strength could ultimately lead towards a traitor victory, unless Horus himself was slain prior to the Siege of Terra. While it is admittedly possible that the Loyalists could still potentially claim victory, even if only barely, it is a distinct possibility that the sheer weight of numbers afforded by the traitor legions would be far too much for the forces of the Imperium to stand against. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.